story in my life today is that I finally figured out the Fraunhofer lines, why they emit and absorb exactly the same frequency. How is that possible? In other words, you see this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, K? Those are 9 heaviest lines. Then you see these little bitty lines in the background, those other lines. What does this mean? It means that these heavy ones are the heaviest absorption and emission lines. So if one of these things here is hot, it gives off the radiation of one of these frequencies, these lines. If it's cold, it absorbs the exact same frequency. So how does that happen? Well, I finally figured it out. And it just dawned on me. So this is kind of new. I'm a little excited, so stay with me. You probably don't know much about this. A lot of people don't. But see, these are the elements, and this is the wavelength. You see that wavelength? 898.765 nanometers. Do you know how specific that is? Do you have any clue how you know how big a nanometer is? A billionth of a meter, and that's how they know that that's oxygen, because they see that exact line on this spectrum. You see down here, these are the wavelengths. Red is way out at the long wavelength, see 790. I mean, yeah, up in that area, 6, 7, 8, 9. Up in that area. These are the visible spectrums, and this is what we end up seeing, because everything that we see radiates in the visible spectrum. That's the only place it can radiate, and that is because of these bouncing electrons. And now I'm going to show you why I am so excited. But remember how specific these numbers are. That means that these locations of these particular electrons, which that's what these are, is so specific that you can give them sacred numbers. You can say that is an exact number, that's a sacred number, and because it is also on a certain plane and angle, you can call that sacred geometry. So, if you have a sacred number and you have sacred geometry, you also have sacred letters, because numbers are associated to letters. That's exactly how programming works. There's nothing but numbers, and they all turn into everything else, letters and colors and touch and feel and all that stuff, artificial intelligence, nothing but numbers. All right, so here we go. Again, going into light, very excited, finally figured out the reason for these black and white spots and this thing, and it relates to the Fraunhofer lines. So how did I make this discovery? Well, I've been looking at this and looking and I'm trying to figure it out, and I came to the conclusion it had to be a torus. And inside the choke point of the torus, it turned the electricity backwards, which I'm saying it's electricity. It's some kind of power. It's spinning on a right-hand spin, and I am going to explain to you exactly how it creates this black and white, and that is the Fraunhofer lines, the absorption and emission lines. They're the same, and the only reason for that is because one of them goes spinning in one way and it spins back out the other way, and they will be identical, and I will show you how that happens. So one of them is absorption, one of them is emission. Finally figured it out. All right, everybody's pretty much seen this. This is the one, just the light shooting out. This is the light going through the venturi, and this is what comes out of the venturi, and we see a couple of these particles, which I'm calling electrons, and I'm calling them polarized particles. We see black and white. There's no question that's plus and minus. What is it doing? I'm going to show you, and this is an electron. This is the smallest particle there is. We live in an electron world. We don't live in a proton world. Protons are the structural supports of everything. The electrons are the place where we live. Those do everything. And now I think I understand how they work, and I think I understand literally how they communicate with each other. You say, how could I possibly understand how molecules could communicate with each other? They communicate with each other with these pulses in a torus. This guy here is absolutely brilliant. His name is Stan Tenen. This video is First Light, an introduction to Maru Foundation research. Brilliant guy. He's going into the Torah and saying these were the letters that spoke our universe into existence, and they came out of a torus. And he divided the torus into 3 separate planes of rotation, and each plane of rotation has a I'll show you. Let me just show this to you. I don't want to make this too confusing, but he's going to show you how a torus actually folds in on itself. Now, I say that light is spinning around here and going in, it hits the bottom, and it spins back out. So inside, it's making power, coming back out, it's sucking power back out. Dark, light going in, dark coming out. Now, watch this. You see that?
And that would all work as one unit. And so that's what the first verse of Genesis draws. It draws a kind of donut called a torus, a two-dimensional surface on a torus. So we've now identified the first verse of Genesis.
Now, if he takes that and turns it, every letter in the first sentence of Genesis shows up with these different dimensional angles. I made some here somewhere, but he'll show you. He's going to show it what this.
It folds itself up.
See?
Into a donut. This is the bagel theory of reality.
This guy is brilliant. Watch this. Look, watch.
Off of the donut.
That's the part right there.
And
look.
You have a little.
That's the part inside the torus that rolls in, and in my model, it rolls in and it keeps rolling and it rolls back out, and that lets it come around, and then it rolls in again, and then it rolls back out, and it keeps and it rolls in, and it's the structure of the torus that allows that to happen, and it is the inductance and the choking of the field in the neck that creates enough reverse electromotive force to keep this thing rocking. That's what because I know that when you choke incoming electrical spin, and you crush it down, you can crush it enough to where it will, and when it can't go any further and it saturates that point and it restricts it so much that it has to pulse backwards, it can pulse backwards many, many times what the incoming pulse was. In that, it'll come into this big capacitance area and then back into a restriction, blow it back out again, and it'll just keep rocking back and forth. That's what I'm hoping is correct. And that's what I'm seeing. And this is the structure, and listen to what he says.
Vortex. This is the definition of the donut. You don't need the rest of the donut. Mathematicians don't need the dough. They just want to know what the surface is, how it all fits together.
That particular...
And what we found, and this is really quite startling, is when we simplified it mathematically, we ended up producing a form that looked just like this. This is the form we actually made. This is a minimal geometric way to represent the way the first verse of Genesis forms itself when its letters are paired up, just like making a paper model. Now you'll probably notice, particularly if you know something of Jewish tradition and teaching, that this looks a little like a flame. And the letters are said to come from a flame or from fire. They were written in fire on the original tablets given to Moshe. If you look at this form from different directions, you can see all shadows, two-dimensional outlines of all the Hebrew letters. We're pretty sure the same form, or some very, very closely related form, produces the Arabic letters, and a related form, but not quite the same, produces the Greek letters. And so we've got the first verse of Genesis folding itself up into a form that when you look at the form from different directions, makes all the letters in which the text is written. And so we have our fruit tree yielding fruit whose seed is in itself. And when we look at it from the appropriate directions, for instance, that direction, let me hold it here, it might be easier, we see the Hebrew letter bet. The English equivalent would be the letter B, the Greek would be beta. This object, this entirely asymmetrical object, which in the past we've identified as a flame of consciousness, Hebrew letters are said to come from.
I'll tell you what, he goes on quite a bit, and there's a whole ton of these videos, and he is fabulous. It's called the Maru Foundation Research Group, and the guy's name is Stan Tenen, and I want to show you something about what he says that flame is. I made some here. All right, I'm going to show you this in a second. This is the thing that he was just doing, and I made another little one. When you unfold it, you have that's what you got. You got a triangle that's like a bullet, a flame. And not only that, I'm going to show you something else over here. All right, I've been talking over and over and over about the right-hand rule. Light spins to the right. I've shown this with the experiments we did with the lasers. There's no question whatsoever. Now, and it's accepted. It's the right-hand rule. Now, so what does the light do? It spins to the right, around and around and around. If it hits this vortex, it spins to the right. It gets caught in this spin. It spins and spins. It hits the bottom where there's a choke in the middle of the torus. It pushes it backwards, but it's still spinning to the right this way. It's coming up this way, but it's dark. It only creates the light when it's spinning to the correct direction. Now it's still spinning to the correct direction, but it's moving backwards. That means that you won't create any. It's gathering its power into itself. That's where you get the dark. So what happens now? It's spinning to the right, in, creating light. It hits the bottom and continues to spin back out and spins around, and you get darkness here. And then it starts to accelerate going in, creating light, hits the bottom, forces itself back out, still spinning to the right. It never turns to the left. It comes back this way, gathering itself into itself. And then it's still spinning to the right here. It starts to accelerate, causing heat and light, and this is what gives you that bounce. Now, what happens at this choke point? This is the key. Okay, right here, what happens here is you have two back-to-back venturis. All right, because you choked right here. There's a choke. A choke means you can't get past there. The field crushes itself so hard that it explodes backwards. That creates this. Then it throws it back around here. Same thing here, crushes itself, throws it back out. So what's the takeaway here? Light creates letters, what this other guy says, in the torus, the Torah, and all of these letters that are created by these little spinning particles, and they're totally symmetrical. What happens going in exactly comes out, only it's backwards. It's this way, it's this way, this way. So it's just this, or it's backwards. But see it this way here? This way here. Identical, but backwards. Now, what does that do? They're mirror images. Now, I used to work in electronics, and I know there's such a thing as a handshake. You send something out, it says, did you get what I sent you? And it says, yes, I got that exact same number. That's called a check digit verification. That's the only way you can send data and be sure that it arrives correctly. These things oppose each other on incoming and outcoming. I don't know how they communicate. I can't talk to them. I wish I could. Now, but I can tell you one thing, they're a mirror image of each other, and that is exactly what Stan Tenen says. He talks about this mirror image, very important. The black is the absorption, the red is the emission. It seems there are 9 different frequencies, because there's 9 different heavy absorption lines. That means there's 9 different distances of particles that work with this specific geometry, sacred geometry, sacred numbers. There's 9 dark lines in the Fraunhofer emission spectrum and absorption spectrum. They're identical. Every one of these particles, it sends out exactly the same thing going out as coming in. It's the only way you can explain the Fraunhofer lines. There's just no other explanation, and I tell you, I worked on this for a long time. The only way you can absorb and emit is something like this, and I'm telling you, that's it. So it only seems that there's 9 different resonance frequencies. And I looked up like a salt experiment where they vibrate a plate, and at the 9th frequency, it starts to fall apart. In the first 8 frequencies, there's a rule of 8, it's called, where you have 8 different electrons orbiting the valence shell of atoms. And they are stable. There's 8 of them. Boom, 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 boom. You can see them in their pattern. Boom, boom, boom. At the 9th, they start to fall apart, and past that, they will not sit in their orbitals. Those are called isotopes. They cannot stay together because the frequencies do not work past 8 and 9. And that gives you all the 8 and 9 frequencies that Fraunhofer saw. So I have to say there's 8 or 9 different species of electrons. They never gave electrons any consideration whatsoever. They're so small, they just didn't even count them hardly. So, they do have some form of a weight. I believe they give them some tiny. But it's nothing like the nuclear masses that they attribute to things that really create the weight of things. So, electron flood appears to be totally validated in every single possible way. Spin's going in, you get the light, it keeps spinning, but it's coming back out. Going reverse, you get the dark. Case closed on my side.